Feeling inspired by hosts Ron and Tyler? This episode of the MovieBuffs Podcast is brought to you by the YouTube workout channel Time to Train Fitness. With all things YouTube, it's free. Jump into a bar class, crank out a cycling workout, or pump out a strength session. Everything you need to work out for free at home. Check out the description and subscribe today.
A quick promo break here in this episode. If you've been a fan of our podcast, you've probably already heard me, Tyler, one of your hosts, talk about the Naboso insoles. If you are ever wondering about, what are insoles? How do they help my feet? Are they really useful? I got to tell you that I've been wearing these Duo insoles for probably a year and a half now, and I think they're game changers. If you sit at a desk, if you are on your feet, so basically anybody, for anybody in the world, they can really help with your health. If you ever have foot pain or if you have any type of issues with your feet, these can be a game changer for you. Hopefully you take my word on it. You head to the link in the description, you buy yourself a pair, and you come back and you share it that, I actually bought those insoles and they actually do work. You know, that'd be something that we'd love to hear, love to see, because that means that you're working on your health. That's it for the promo break. Let's get back to the episode and keep hearing about all the random things that Ron has to say. Welcome in on an instant reaction episode in the MovieBuffs Podcast. My name is Tyler Valencia, and this movie, I've been waiting a bit to watch it, and it's actually the reason why I signed back up for Netflix. There was a period where I didn't have Netflix. I felt like the content was all the same, and there wasn't really anything worth paying I paid for the 4K, the HD version of it, so the $20+ for it. So we got rid of it for a couple months, and that is The Killer from David Fincher. Now, before I start talking about the movie, I do want to explain what these episodes are. A few weeks ago, had a commenter kind of get upset about the direction of an instant reaction episode. It could have been because it was about the Marvels, but I know that they were upset that I didn't give some in-depth perspective on the Marvels that basically agreed with their viewpoint on it. And my comment back to them was that these instant reaction episodes are not about that. They're not in-depth, scene-by-scene breakdowns. These instant reaction episodes are meant to be spoiler-ish free. They're meant to promote a movie that I believe people will enjoy watching, that they should take the time out of their week, their busy schedule, to watch this movie or a movie. And if a movie was not meeting those guidelines in terms of that I think is worth the watch, I most likely wouldn't do an episode on that particular content, whether it is a show or a movie, because we try not to do too much negative perspective on content. And with instant reaction episodes, I believe that they should be fun and they should give background information, because that's kind of what I like to do. I like to look and see what the director did and cast and trivia, all that kind of stuff. And hopefully these episodes provide that type of experience for you and give you that motivation to sit down for a movie that potentially might be too long or might be something that you've been on the fence about. So as always, thank you for listening to the MovieBuffs Podcast. These episodes and this podcast is something that Ron and I do in our free time. It's not our day-to-day. We do it for fun. And so we appreciate you taking the time to listen. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. That is a platform that we are trying to grow. If you have the time, head to the description for this episode. Make sure you smash that subscribe button and follow us on Instagram. I'm going to start this by talking about the cast and crew. Now, that is part of why I actually wanted to watch this one. And that's the director, David Fincher. And I'm about halfway through a pretty lengthy article, and I'm going to reference it a little bit later. But if you are unfamiliar with David Fincher, Fight Club, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Zodiac, Gone Girl, Social Network. One of my favorite pieces is Mindhunter. He was a showrunner and he directed a few episodes for it. And I listed a bunch of great content right there. And that's probably, when I think about it in my head, about half or maybe a third of a really solid filmography. So David Fincher, he's the director for it. Cast includes Michael Fassbender, Tilda Swinton, and Charles Parnell. Now, Michael Fassbender is the majority of the movie. Those other characters that I mentioned, big names, they are in it for a scene or two. But I think that really shows to the quality of the cast, of the director. It kind of reminds me of Oppenheimer. I think that's something that my wife and we would say about how every time a new character or scene came up, it was another A-list actor. And I think that goes back to the director. Tilda Swinton and Charles Parnell, they've been in a lot of great movies over the last few years, and they are in it for a scene. And that's it. And I really think that people want to work with quality directors, quality content creators. And as I mentioned, all the movies that David Fincher has done. And I mean, the article that I'm reading about him talks about his personality and how some people might perceive him. And yet people continue to work with him. So that is the casting crew. Let me give you the IMDb storyline about this movie. The killer, that is a man solitary and cold, methodical and unencumbered by scruples or regrets. The killer waits in the shadows, watching for his next target. And yet the longer he waits, the more he thinks he's losing his mind, if not his cool. A brutal, bloody, and stylish noir story of a professional assassin lost in a world without a moral compass. This is a case study of a man alone, armed to the teeth and slowly losing his mind. Now, if you watch the trailer on Netflix, you'll see that something happens and he kind of goes on the runish, or he goes on a revenge tour because basically what happens in the first 15 minutes kind of sets up the whole story and sets him on this kind of path. And it's mostly his inner dialogue. This movie it's Michael Fassbender, the killers. His inner dialogue is what moves this movie. You don't really hear him talk that much. And something I do typically later in these episodes is I give my recommendation who might like this. I'm going to start this kind of breakdown part of this episode with it because I think that this movie, it takes a particular type of viewer. That was one of my first, when I was talking about the movie with my wife, that's something that after every movie we watch, new movie, she asked me what I think about it, and I give her my instant reaction and what's kind of on my mind. And that was the first thing I said, that it takes a particular type of viewer. Now, I enjoyed it, but I like David Fincher. I think he's fascinating. I think he's a artistic director that there's things along the whole movie that you could go scene by scene and you'll just appreciate the art of it, the effect of it, the sense that he's trying to basically put through the screen. And I say that because this movie, you might not enjoy it if you want some action, or you think that this is going to be a John Wick style movie. I love John Wick, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying you might not like it if you are maybe someone that you watch a new movie or a new show and you maybe give it 15 minutes. And if you are someone like that, you might switch it off, and this movie would not make that cutoff point because it is slow. It is a build. It is a movie that you might question and be like, what is this movie trying to do? Because it's different. And I think that if you don't understand, or if you don't get why fictitious movies like Fight Club, like Gone Girl, that are pieces that are artistic in the content that they make. Yes, they are gruesome. Yes, there are scenes that are unsavory, but there are art within it. And I think that this is something that you won't stick around for. I think this movie's around 2 hours long. Now, I talked about something already, the pacing of it. Is it too slow? I think that it takes a patient viewer. I think that if you are thinking that this isn't, like I said, to be John Wick, or he's going to be some insane killer that is just boom, boom, boom all around. It is a slow build. It is essentially listening to a killer's inner dialogue and his perspective on anything, and his constant battle within his head, because he's essentially battling, going against some of his beliefs and some of the things that he's built up. And there's scenes in it where you see that he's been doing this for a long time. And those are small details that you might not realize right off the bat. But when you go back to think about them, you're like, oh, wow, he's been doing this for a long time. And yet he's going against all of these things because something happens that causes him to go down that road. Now, do I think it's too slow? No. But again, I am one of those viewers that enjoyed it. I appreciated the movies. I appreciated a lot of the small things with it. I thought it was very artistic. I thought it was an enjoyable movie. But I can see the other side of it, that it might be too slow for people. Another promo break for you here. If you are a fan of the podcast, you know at the beginning of each episode, there is a promotion for Time to Train Fitness on YouTube that does online workouts that are free, 100% free on YouTube. What was just added was a 12-day workout series. So if you have dumbbells, if you have an indoor bike, you can follow this for 1 month to help you get back on track and work on your fitness. Check it out at the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe and make sure that you keep listening to the MovieBuffs Podcast. And I have to keep constantly putting these things out there because I do know that David Fincher is a director that has a strong following, and somebody listening to this might think that, oh, you don't like David Fincher. No, I just told you all the things I do like from him. I've probably seen Zodiac way too many times, and yet that's a very long movie, but it's one that I do put on in the background a lot because I thoroughly enjoy his style of movie making. And I don't think it's wrong to say that it might be too slow for a majority of people. And even with that being said, there was a couple that I had asked about this movie because they do watch Netflix quite a bit. They are older than myself, and they actually were in that group that they turned it off early. They didn't like it. They thought they couldn't get what was coming through in the beginning scene of it, and they just thought it was weird. And I think a part of that is the style of it. Now, let me continue along that line. We're talking about the cinematography of it. That was actually one of my favorite parts. I think it's very classic David Fincher. The look that you get from Fight Club, Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, Zodiac, Gone Girl, Social Network, that when you look at it, you're like, okay, yeah, that's David Fincher. That you're like, wow, the colors and the lighting, all that, and how it comes through the screen. It's like I said, it's an art form. Or even what is popping out of my head as I'm talking about this right now is there's a scene in the movie where Michael Fassbender is on a moped and he's driving through Paris, and just the streets, the lights, and and essentially how it builds in terms of what's going on in that scene. It's beauty that's coming through. It's masterful. The movements, the music, all that comes into with the cinematography that just, it makes it, it's very suspenseful. And I think that is part of Fincher and what he wants you to experience as the audience, as he's trying to portray it through a movie, a lens. And I think that is a great transition here to the legend of David Fincher, that is. And with doing a little bit of research on this movie and the director, I started to read this article that I mentioned earlier, and I'm about halfway through it. It's, like I mentioned, kind of lengthy. It was from 2020, and it's in, let me think about it, it's in The Ringer. And with this, a quote that I read right before I hit record on this episode was talking about how when he's doing a movie, or there was a quote that somebody, I think it was his either editor or assistant director, was talking about, you should be happy. You're doing this movie. You're back in it. You're working with Brad Pitt. And this is on 7. And I guess he responded, and I'm summarizing here because I can't remember the quote off the top of my head, but he was talking about, Fincher replying how, no, now I have to get this, what's in my head, and basically compromise with viewers, because he has a very distinct process, a distinct vision in his head. But at the same time, he does also have to, I don't want to say tone it down, but he also has to compromise with the audience to make sure that they like it. What's in his head might be too much. And David Fincher, from just hearing about him, and as a movie builds up, like a one like this, even though it was on Netflix, you start to see more content coming out, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on YouTube, that talks about a certain director, and I saw a thing about Mark Ruffalo, and I think it was on Instagram. It was a reel, and I think it was from. I don't watch this, but I've seen many actors go on to the thing where the actor or actress or content creator or musician, whatever it might be, that they're eating spicy chicken wings and they're asked different questions. And Mark Ruffalo, I believe this was the show I was on, he was talking about David Fincher, and he told a story about on the set of Zodiac how they've already were like 30, 50 takes in. And it was, I think he said it was his first day on it. And, David Fincher wants exact. He's manipulating things in the background. He's moving extras. He's doing all these different things in the background. And of course, Mark Ruffalo's scared. It's first day, first time working with him. And like I said before, there are 30, 50 takes and David Fincher's already deleted a certain amount of takes, and he comes by, pats him on the back, and he was ready to basically crap himself because he was so scared and thought he was doing things wrong. But that's a story like that, how they're in that many takes, and David Fincher is manipulating all these small things in the back and looking for that perfect take. That is part of his process, and that was one of the big things that came through in this article. Was how meticulous he is, how precise he is. And a story that's pretty early on in this article talked about a Heineken commercial that he was filming. It was on the plane. There was different sets, different backgrounds that he was supposed to be doing for it. And he basically spent, I think it was around like 5 hours just trying to get the right amount of dew, the right amount of lighting, the right amount of adjustments for a Heineken bottle on a plane to essentially paint what's in his mind onto this screen. And yet it took that long, and how many takes it took, because he wants perfection. He wants exactly what's in his mind. And that type of work ethic, I think that it can turn some people off, because when you are in that creative process, you're in that mode where you're trying to look for exactness. You're trying to get what's in your head out, because in some essence, and I think that this is coming through more in my mind right now as I read that article and I'm saying these things out loud, is there's pressure with it. How many times can you go on any social media app, whether it's Twitter or X, Instagram, YouTube, that people are just tearing apart content constantly, just that negative, because they feel it's this or that. And there's the pressure of it to get that perfection, that exactness, and that level of intensity. I think that it all starts to make more sense. And I think that reputation also, like I mentioned before, it leads to the ability to get high-level actors, actresses that want to be a part, that want to work with you because of your vision and what you're trying to do. Now, I talked a lot about the director because I think that is a big selling point of the movie. Of course, Michael Fassbender is another element of this. If you are a fan of his, then you'll definitely like this movie because it's his voice. It's his inner dialogue for 95 to 97%, if not more, of that movie. I'm sure there's somebody has already broken that down and they know the exactness of it, of how much of the movie is him talking. But he's great in it. He's quality. And I mean, a scene that made me think about this was, and this is because I watched one of those I've talked about before, those Variety or those Esquire where things on YouTube where an actor talks about their career and the roles and what they remember about it. And in that one, he was talking about 300 and how it was a very physical role. And even though he was on it for so little, it was very physical, and how long he trained for it and how much he got in shape for it. And I thought right off the bat, I was like, wow, he's one of those actors. He puts everything into it. And there's a scene early in the film where he goes through some yoga poses and the precision of the footwork. And I'm not a yoga fan. I will say that very openly. I'm not a big fan of yoga, not because of what it can do for the body, but seeing the precision of his foot placement, his balance, all those things. I'm sure that Michael Fassbender practiced those things meticulously to make sure that it was perfection when he performed them on screen. And I think that goes to his level of acting. He is an A-list actor. I knew that he did take a break, and this is the second film that I've watched from him in the last 45 days, I think. So it's great. I'm happy that he's acting again. I don't know if I think as I'm talking out loud here, there might have been something that caused him to stop or take a break, but I don't know much about that. Let me now move into some trivia. This is one of the pieces that I've kind of started adding in at the end of episodes, and these are taken directly from IMDb. That's always one of the fun things that content or a show or a movie that I like, and you go to the trivia section and just see what's in there. Yes, these are written from fans. I don't think they really monitor them, and I don't know the exactness of these, but I think they're pretty interesting. Now, the first one was the graphic novel The Killer, written by Alexis Nolent, illustrated by Luke Huckamon, has been a passion project for David Fincher for nearly 20 years. So that's pretty interesting, in my opinion, to hear how long this has been brewing for him. And you hear about this from other directors. I remember James Cameron in a piece that when all the Avatar stuff was coming out, and him being on one of those things on YouTube that I watch, him talking about how long ago he had the idea of Avatar, and the technology wasn't there for his vision to fully come through. And that kind of reminds me right there with even this one is not as CGI with, or even how James Cameron does his avatars. But it's been brewing for a bit. And the next one that I put on here, in 2008, Fincher originally thought of Brad Pitt for the role of the killer, but Pitt said it was too nihilistic for him. And when I think about that one, I just think of Fight Club, of course, and I'm thinking, interesting. Fight Club, and this one, I would say that the killer is a little more toned down than Seven or even Fight Club, but this is it's interesting in my opinion, because I just saw one of those things on X, and if you go to our X account, you'll see that I do share a lot of these ones, like, oh, what is your favorite Brad Pitt film? I'll start, or mine is X, this film. And if I was to think of my favorite piece of Brad Pitt content, would it be a David Fincher movie? Not 100% sure on that, but I'll need some more time to think about that. And let me hear what yours is in the meantime. Now, let me get to my score of this and my recommendation and wrap this episode up. Already over 20 minutes, and I didn't think this episode would be that long. I gave it a solid 7.5, and I have to clarify that I think it's a solid 7.5. It's not my favorite David Fincher material. I'm not sure I would rewatch it again, but I did enjoy it. I did appreciate the artistic form of it, the difference in terms of what it is and how it's acted, all these different things. I appreciate all those elements. And I think the audience for it would be someone that does like David Fincher, or then they do appreciate the slow build and what he is trying to portray. I think that a lot of people, a lot of viewers are not going to like this film. And I say that without judgment, that if you don't like the David Fincher films, or you think it's too slow, okay, that's fine. That's your opinion on it. I'm saying that I did like it. And I kept coming back to that point throughout this episode, because I do think it's important to put out there that majority of people are not going to like it, but it is a solid movie. It was entertaining. It did keep me entertained the whole time, despite being at home, watching it in a comfortable environment, in my bed. I did not touch my phone once. I was glued to it because I wanted to watch every frame of it. That has been this episode in the MovieBuffs Podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in, listening. This has been a longer instant reaction episode, but I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to know what your favorite Brad Pitt film is, and hopefully you take the time to sit down for this and you are in that audience. But if not, all good. Keep listening, keep watching. Thank you as always, and I'll catch you next one.